Hey guys, yep, still out here on the porch trying to power drive videos and working on my Sunday morning detox. As you can tell, my cheeks just get redder and redder as I sit out here. It's pretty warm. So if I hand you two jars, right, one filled with thick woody burdock root and one filled with delicate little white flowers, which one would you guess herbalists traditionally use for digestive support? Most people would probably pick the root. After all, roots appear stronger, right? More medicinal, more burly, if you will. But today, we're going to talk about a plant that reminds us not to judge a book by its cover. For hundreds of years, herbalists appreciated gentle flowering plants for digestive support. And along the way, it taught a valuable lesson. Not every digestive herb works the same way. So let's talk about Meadowsweet. So before we learn what it does, let's think about the observation of the plant. So if you look at the stems of the plant and you notice the tiny flower clusters, some dried meadowsweet almost looks fluffy, right? Other batches contain more stems than flowers. And that's perfectly normal because many suppliers sell the aerial parts of the plants together. So if you don't get necessarily a batch of just flowers, don't be concerned. Meadowsweet has, if you were to smell it in the wild, right, it smells sweet. See where the name comes from? Some describe it almost honey-like, maybe almond vanilla-ish in smell. In the dry herb, though, it's still there a little bit. So one thing I've noticed over the years is this. Your nose begins to teach you about plants before you ever open a book. So Meadowsweet is a perennial, right? Meaning that it will come back year after year after year. It grows in wet meadows, along streams and places where the soil will stay consistently moist. So by early summer, it sends up those tall stems covered in creamy white flowers that almost look like clouds floating above the grass. And if you've ever wondered where the name came from, well, now you know. Meadowsweet, right? It's like literally sweet scented flowers in meadows. And it loves the meadows, right? The more moggy and soggy they are, the happier the plant will be. So long before pharmacies, people already gathered meadowsweet, not because it was beautiful, although I'm sure some people decorated with it, but it was that smell, that wonderful smell, right? Flowers used to be scattered across the floor of homes to freshen the air in the house. They flavored their beverages with them. They used to decorate for celebrations, right? Because they're, And then over generations, well, people started noticing something else. People kept reaching for meadowsweet after heavy meals or when their stomach just simply felt uncomfortable. That observation became part of traditional herbal knowledge. Now, this is where meadowsweet becomes really interesting. So I want you to think back to the digestive herbs we've already studied, right? So we've got what? We did ginger already that warms. Peppermint relaxes your digestive muscles and cools. Fennel traditionally helps with gas and bloat. Dandelion and chicory are bitter herbs that will encourage your digestion. Burdock nourishes your gut flora, right? So everyone has its own personality. So where would meadowsweet fit in the conversation? Well, herbalists have traditionally turned to it when the stomach felt irritated or could use gentle support rather than stimulation, right? So if two people both said, my stomach hurt, the answer isn't always the same herb, as we know, right? And learning that difference is what begins changing from memorizing herbs, right? The people that just spout out, oh, we'll always take that. Then people that actually get to know you, right? If somebody just blurts something out 9 times out of 10 and don't ask you a lot of questions, I'd be concerned. So every medicinal plant contains hundreds of naturally occurring compounds, and we don't need to know the chemistry to understand that it's really there. But one group of the compounds in Meadowsweet has a very interesting story, right? So the natural sacchalates, I think that's how you say that. People think aspirin, right? But not exactly. So scientists study the compounds found in plants like Meadowsweet while developing medicines, right? So that's no new information. But a whole herb is not the same thing as a manufactured drug. Herbalists traditionally work with the entire plant where many compounds exist together, right? That's why you'll often hear herbalists talk about the wisdom of the whole plant instead of just one ingredient in the plant. So Meadowsweet is not an aspirin replacement. So here's another lesson Meadowsweet teaches us. Preparation matters. So the flowers are delicate, right? So think about burdock, right? So as we talked about burdock, right, you've got to boil that one for a while because it's thick to be able to get the constituents out of it that you need, right? You've got to really kind of break down that woody, dense, matter. But would you do that with delicate flowers? Probably not, right? So the roots benefit from that long simmering, but if you were to do that to the flowers, well, you kind of cook everything you needed out of them, right? So flowers usually prefer a gentle infusion, right? Too much heat can damage the delicate aromatic compounds and change the character of the tea. Choosing the right preparation is always the best part of becoming the herbalist, right? So if you want to grow Meadowsweet, you're going to want to live in a marsh. No. So pay attention to where the name already puts it, right? So it's going to have wet soil, near a creek bank, low areas, moist meadow. Unlike Mediterranean herbs that love dry conditions, Meadowsweet enjoys having consistently moist roots, right? They like wet feet. When the flowers first open, it's generally the best time to harvest them, right? Dry them slowly out of direct sunlight to preserve both their aroma and their quality. If you want some homework from this lesson, right, I want you to compare herbs instead of just one, right? So if you get Meadowsweet, I want you to get some Meadowsweet and then place it beside burdock and then dandelion, right? And if you have peppermint too, right? So that's, you got leaf, roots, flower, right? I want you to look at them, smell them, feel the difference, right? And ask yourself, if I didn't know anything about these herbs, right? Let's say you hadn't watched this video, shame on you, but would I expect them all to work exactly the same? Probably not, right? Every herb has its own personality, right? The more plants you meet, the more closely those personalities begin to make sense, right? Like fresh pasta versus dried pasta, right? You wouldn't prepare those necessarily the same way either, right? So why would you think plants would operate any different? So we talked about Meadowsweet today. We have learned that it is a gentle flowering herb that has quietly earned its place over hundreds of years of use. As we continue this digestive system series, right, I hope you're starting to see the pattern, right? Herbalists don't ask, again, what's our best digestive herb? They ask what digestion support looks like for this person. Again, just rattling off herbs is not necessarily beneficial. I'll do that for topical stuff, right? Because there's a lot of calendula and stuff like that topically that you can just rattle off and there's not a lot of side effects. But when you start to take stuff internally, you can't just rattle off herbs because depending on that person's genetic makeup, their allergies, any gene mutations. You can rattle off herbs, any medications they're taking, right? I mean, there's some that they'll literally stop you from absorbing your pharmaceuticals that you need just to survive, right? So you've got to be very careful about people that are just like, this is the best herb on the planet. Maybe not for you. Maybe not for you. So we're going to do a few more digestive herbs. And then when we get to the formulation video, I'm going to kind of talk about more. Some of the herbs you'll start to notice overlap into different body systems. And instead of redoing the video from a digestive perspective, right, when we do the formulation video, I'll kind of bring those back in, right? So we've already talked about chamomile, but chamomile will come back into play with digestion, but there's no point in doing another video because, again, these are to learn about the plants, not necessarily formulations. I think we have about 3 or 4 more videos to go until we get to formulation. And then we'll go into more detail about that. But I do want you guys, especially if you have a place where you can source these herbs responsibly near you, right? Maybe you have an apothecary near you. Maybe you have a natural food store that just has them, in glass jars where you can go play. I have one about 45 minutes from me and I go quite often. But I want you to start getting these things, even if you can't afford to buy them, right? Most places don't care if you just go and look at them and smell them and study them. That's the good thing about buying by the ounce in those smaller stores. You can get a very small amount to play with, right? It doesn't take a lot to make a tea. So it gives you that familiarity, which is kind of nice. So I do encourage you to do that, and don't feel like you can't learn just because you don't have the capacity to grow. I mean, I'm doing things in pots and playing and learning and making mistakes and just having fun with it. But I still can source my stuff from reputable companies online for the things that I can't grow, right? So I do encourage you to at least get familiar with some of these things, even if it's through teas or, like I said before, buying some tinctures and trying to figure out why they put those in there. Again, just sometimes asking different questions makes us learn a lot easier. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Until next time, guys, stay rooted, stay curious, and as always, keep growing in grace.